I'm going to try to shed some light on Lab 9 and creating or designing database tables. First, take a look at this. This is the first screen you find when you go to Microsoft Access, a database management system. In order to start a database, I have to click on Blank Database, and then I'm going to create. And unlike word processing, where you get a nice blank sheet of paper and you can just start typing right away, a database doesn't do that for you. It doesn't have any idea what fields or data you may enter into the table. Every table is different. So the first thing we have to do is define the different fields, that is the different kinds of information we're going to put into a table. So I'm going to go to Design View, and it even wants to know what name I want to give this before I've even gotten started. I'm going to accept table, click on OK, and now this is the area that lets me define each field that's in the table. Now I've taken this and I've put it into a word processing document. So here you can see that same screen, and I just wanted to go over each piece. You don't have to use Access, but I think it helps to see this structure in order to see how you create each field definition for your table. Each field, of course, has a name. It'll have a data type. It could be text data, numeric data, a date. You might include a description. And then you also have to include the field size. If you look down here, the default field size is 255 characters. That's usually much larger than we need, as you're going to see when we go through creating the tables for this lab. Alright, so this is the information we're trying to capture. In order to do that, we have to know, what does our data look like? So here's the sample inventory, product inventory data. We can see that we've got product name, type. We've also got a code here that identifies each one of these products uniquely, as well as the cost. So in my product table then, I've created it, set it up in a table format so that I can see each field and its characteristics. So across the top here identifies each column: my field name, my field description, field type, and field length. So one of the fields I'm going to need to include is product ID, and we saw that up here in the data. An example would be SR001. And I'm going to describe this. It's the unique product code, and because it's characters and values, I'm going to call it text. And I know how big it needs to be, that is how many character spaces I need to save, by looking at the data. And one of the items actually has a 6-character product ID. So I need to make it as big as the biggest piece of information that could go in that field, in this case 6. I've done the same thing for product name, product type, and cost. Those are the individual pieces of information I'm going to have for each record in my table. And then I also need a primary key. This is the unique identifier that lets me find each record in the table. And in this case, it's the product ID. There will not be 2 products with the same product ID. Let's take a look at the customer list. So now I want a table that keeps track of my customers. This is going to be a different set of fields. Again, looking at my data, I can see that for each customer I have a customer ID. So I went ahead and created a field called customer ID, and it's a 2-character in length. So my field length is 2, and then I also have customer name, street, city, state, and zip. I made the zip text even though it's values, because it's not going to ever be used in calculations, and unless the value is going to be used in calculations, it doesn't need to be set up as a number. I've got a primary key. Yes, primary key in this case is customer ID. Each customer will have a unique customer ID. Then I'm going to come down to my sample purchase data. These are examples of transactions that have occurred, what somebody has bought, and I want to keep track of that. So I can see that the company with the code AI purchased these products on this particular date. Well, I need some way to uniquely identify each of these purchases, so I'm going to create something called a transaction ID. Sometimes you have to create a new field when you're defining a table. So my transaction ID will identify each transaction, and I've decided to make it 3 characters in length. That means I could have up to 999 transactions. I also have the customer ID and this is going to have the same field length as the one in the customer table. Units sold, product ID. Again, what product did they buy? It's identified by product ID, which is the same as in the product table. And then the transaction date. Does it have a primary key? Yes, that transaction ID that I set up. How are these related? One of the important aspects of database tables is that they are related to one another through their fields. So my customer table is related to my purchase table because they both contain the customer ID. The product table is related to the purchase table because they both contain product ID. I hope that helps you see how you need to create the fields for each table before you actually enter the data. And that's what I'm trying to get you to do with this lab. Define the table structure before you enter the data.